A millionaire finds a girl unconscious in the rain by the road. He takes her to his mansion to save her. But when she wakes up, she says something that changes everything. Hello, viewer. Thanks for joining us. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. Adam Donovan, a 40-year-old hotel magnate with dark, precisely trimmed hair and a neat, close-cropped beard, stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corporate suite in the Donovan, Chicago. His eyes, an intense shade of blue, scanned the sweeping view of the city's skyline. Below him, streets buzzed with life, but from the penthouse level, it all seemed remote and far away, like a kingdom belonging to someone else. He prided himself on the elegance of his surroundings, the polished marble floors, the reflective glass walls, and the quiet hum of technology woven seamlessly into the space. Colleagues whispered that he had built an empire from nothing, turning one modest motel into the Donovan luxury hotels chain. Yet for all his apparent confidence, there was a distant look in his gaze that hinted at something deeper beneath the polished exterior. An urgent vibration interrupted the hush. Jessica Miller, his 38-year-old assistant with meticulously pinned blonde hair and thin-framed glasses, walked in holding a sleek tablet. "Adam," she said, her voice subdued but efficient, "they're ready in the conference room." Jessica had worked for him nearly a decade, quietly observing the subtle changes in his demeanor over time. It was just enough to notice that he sometimes stared too long at the glittering horizon, as if searching for something. Adam nodded, then walked briskly across the expansive office. Passing a table displaying a single framed photo, an image of a younger Adam beside a rundown house on Chicago's South Side, he hesitated. His father's disapproving face hovered in memory. Adam pushed the recollection aside and continued on. In the conference room, the air felt charged. Tall windows revealed the cityscape, while a colossal wooden table seated a small army of executives. Technology flickered on screens, displaying financial projections. Adam had gathered them to finalize the acquisition of a historic property in a nearby Chicago neighborhood. The plan was to convert the century-old building into a boutique hotel, a move that could raise his brand's profile even further. Preservation activists, however, were mounting pressure. They believed the building was an irreplaceable piece of the city's heritage, and the tension around this deal had grown intense. Adam leaned forward, commanding the room with the same precision he used to manage every aspect of his life. "We are close to securing the Wilcott building. Once the sale completes, we'll begin renovations immediately," he said firmly. The executives exchanged glances of both admiration and unease, fully aware that public opposition could spark controversy. Adam was known for his unyielding focus. If he set his sights on something, he pursued it relentlessly. Despite his unwavering façade, a stir of something else wove through his thoughts that morning. As the meeting concluded, he realized with sharp annoyance that he had left an important folder behind after dining at Le Jardin the evening before. The upscale restaurant, tucked near his private property outside the city, had recently changed management. He'd visited for a discreet meeting, then hurried out when a sudden call diverted his attention. Now that folder, containing sensitive financials for the new acquisition, was nowhere to be found. He turned to Jessica. "Reach out to Le Jardin," he instructed, careful to maintain composure. "I need that folder brought back here immediately." Jessica nodded and typed a note. "Right away," she answered, though Adam sensed unease flicker in her eyes. No one liked to see him lose control of any detail, no matter how small. The day's schedule was relentless, with back-to-back negotiations and phone calls. Still, an uneasy tension gnawed at him. After the final meeting of the morning, Adam escaped to his private office and approached that single photo again. It reminded him of how far he had come, from a cramped, noisy neighborhood in South Chicago to owning an empire that soared above the clouds. Yet, a strange heaviness settled in his chest whenever he considered what he might have sacrificed along the way. He placed the photo face down, as though turning away from an uncomfortable reflection. Outside, thunder rumbled, signaling a gathering storm. In the quiet, immaculate office, Adam Donovan felt a flicker of restlessness that no achievement had ever fully silenced. Adam sat in the back of his black limousine, the city lights distorted by sheets of rain against the windows. Dusk had fallen, and the erratic flashes of lightning illuminated his expression, tightly controlled frustration. Across from him, Michael Reynolds, his 52-year-old driver and longtime confidant, glanced in the rearview mirror. A faint hint of concern etched Michael's otherwise stoic face. "Sir, the roads are getting worse. Flood advisories just came in for some areas near your estate," he said, keeping his tone respectful but direct. Adam's jaw tightened. He hated losing command of even the smallest situation, and a sudden torrential downpour was utterly beyond his control. "Stay the course, Michael," Adam replied, scanning his phone. Jessica's text messages offered no solution. The folder was still missing. He exhaled sharply, recalling that the folder contained a set of confidential financial statements regarding the Wilcott building project. Rumors of the acquisition had already stirred controversy among local preservationists. If the numbers inside leaked, it might jeopardize the deal and his reputation. Rain pelted the limousine's roof in a relentless cadence. Cars slowed to a crawl, forming a bumper-to-bumper snarl on the highway. Adam drummed his fingers against the leather seat. He rarely made mistakes, and the mere fact that he had misplaced such critical documents infuriated him. Dialing his phone, he contacted Jessica again. "Any update?" he asked, voice clipped. "We spoke with a manager at Le Jardin, but they haven't found it," Jessica replied through the crackling line. "The place is practically empty due to the storm." "Maybe it's in there lost and found, or maybe it fell under a table. They're checking again." Adam ended the call with a curt nod. Anxiety simmered beneath his composed exterior. Normally, he'd stride into the restaurant himself, but the storm had hit with an intensity that made travel treacherous. He tried to push the situation from his mind, focusing on the screen that displayed messages from Robert Chen, his 45-year-old corporate attorney, who was preparing final documents for the Wilcott deal. Investors were restless, impatient for the plan's green light. Thunder rattled the car as traffic ground to a standstill. Adam closed his eyes, recalling the days of his youth when a leaky roof and battered windows meant each storm was a threat to his family's meager stability. Back then, water pooling in the kitchen was reason enough to fear the next day's expenses. Now, decades later, he wielded enough money to weather nearly any crisis. Yet the memory of helplessness haunted him, fueling an obsession with control. Lightning lit the interior, revealing tension in Adam's features. He pressed a button to open the partition. "Michael, any chance we can detour?" Michael shook his head. "Gridlock, sir. The main roads to your property are partially flooded. News says some might be closing soon." Adam's phone buzzed, a call from Robert Chen. "Adam, I need that folder before tomorrow's meeting," Robert said. "The board expects a polished presentation. Tell me you have it." "I'm handling it," Adam replied tersely, wishing the conversation would end. He tapped his phone to disconnect, then took a steadying breath. Pressure from all sides was mounting, leaving him feeling cornered in a way he despised. Through the rain-streaked glass, the city lights blurred into an indistinct glow. Lightning flashed again, illuminating Adam's reflection. For a moment, he stared at his own eyes, spotting a flicker of vulnerability that unsettled him. He quickly straightened his posture. The storm outside roared on, and the roads continued to snarl with accidents and stalled vehicles. Still, he was determined to press forward. "Keep going," he ordered Michael. "I refuse to be stopped by a little rain." "Yes, sir," came the calm reply. The limo inched along. The swirling wind seemed to mock Adam's attempts to maintain command. Rain battered against the windows, echoing the pounding of his pulse. Every second lost, every yard barely gained, stoked the frustration swirling within him. Far ahead, beyond the sheets of water, his estate awaited, along with a worry he couldn't quite quell, no matter how hard he tried. Barely visible through the downpour, the wrought-iron gates to Adam Donovan's secluded estate finally appeared. The limousine's headlights cut through sheets of rain, revealing a private drive lined by tall oak trees whipping in the wind. Each clap of thunder vibrated through the car, underscoring the mounting sense of urgency. Michael guided the vehicle slowly toward the entrance, careful not to swerve on the slick pavement. Adam peered through the windshield and felt a rush of relief that he was at last approaching home. The prospect of a warm interior and a plan to retrieve his missing folder brought a surge of determination. Then, out of nowhere, something along the roadside caught his eye. A dark figure lay sprawled at the edge of the driveway, illuminated by the harsh glow of the headlights. Michael hit the brakes, and the limousine slid several feet before stopping. "What on earth?" Adam muttered, adrenaline jolting him upright. Lightning flashed, and he saw a motionless form, possibly a woman, drenched and unmoving. He felt a sudden jolt of concern, a sensation unfamiliar in his meticulously structured life. Michael lowered his window part way. Rain blew in, drenching the interior. "Sir, it looks like someone is hurt." Adam's first instinct was to call emergency services. Protocol would demand it, especially given liability concerns. Yet his hand hovered over his phone, indecision rooting him in place. The storm had caused communications to be unreliable, and every minute spent waiting on assistance could worsen the situation. He thought of the times he'd seen people turn a blind eye to suffering on the streets when he was growing up. "Open the door," he finally said. Stepping out, Adam was drenched instantly. He cursed under his breath as water seeped into his expensive leather shoes. Approaching cautiously, he found a woman with dark, waterlogged hair plastered to her face. Her breathing was shallow, her clothes soaked through. She looked like she could be in her early or mid-30s. In her grip was a soaked folder. He froze at the sight of familiar documents peeking out from its corner. "Michael, help me get her in the car," Adam ordered, raising his voice above the roaring wind. Together, they carefully lifted the woman into the limo. Adam noticed a superficial scrape on her forehead, a minor wound compared to the possibility of hypothermia. Once inside, the interior lights revealed more details. Her complexion was pallid, and she wore professional attire now ruined by rain and mud. Michael handed Adam a spare towel. Adam pressed it gently against the cut on her head. For a moment, he felt a flicker of panic. He hadn't practiced first aid in ages, but bits of training came back to him. "We need to get her warmed up," he said, adrenaline fueling his focus. Water dripped onto the plush leather seats, and Adam couldn't help but think about damage to the upholstery. He was accustomed to controlling every detail in his environment. But as he looked at the unconscious woman's face, any thought of inconvenience faded, replaced by a surprising surge of concern. "Drive," Adam told Michael. "Get us inside the gates, slowly, then park by the front entrance." Once the limo moved forward, Adam inspected the damp folder. It was definitely his. He recalled that the new manager at Le Jardin had taken his contact information in case they found it. Could this woman be that manager? The puzzle pieces formed in his mind, stirring new questions. Why was she here, alone, in the middle of a downpour? He pressed his fingers to the woman's wrist, relieved to find a weak but steady pulse. Satisfied she was alive, he set the folder aside. The gates creaked open automatically, and the limo pulled onto a circular driveway. The mansion lights shimmered through the rain, an imposing sanctuary in the storm. Moments later, Adam scooped the woman into his arms. Lightning forked overhead, as if marking the significance of the moment. He strode toward the grand double doors, the unconscious stranger cradled against him. 1,000 concerns surged through his mind, yet for the first time in years he acted out of instinctual compassion rather than cold calculation. The foyer of Adam's mansion gleamed under soft, recessed lighting. Polished marble stretched across the floor, reflecting the massive chandelier overhead. Cradling the unconscious woman, Adam felt the chilly, air-conditioned space contrast sharply with his soaked clothing. Martha Sullivan, his 60-year-old housekeeper with gentle grey hair and a motherly demeanour, rushed forward as soon as they entered. "Oh my goodness, Mr. Donovan!" she exclaimed, her eyes wide behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Bring her this way." They navigated through the impressive hall, adorned with modern art and tasteful decor, until they reached a luxurious guest suite. A king-size bed with crisp, white linens waited, its gold and navy accents echoing the subdued opulence of the mansion. Adam gently laid the woman on the bed, and Martha began examining her with practiced caution. "Sir, she's very cold," Martha said, pulling a blanket over the woman's drenched business suit. "We should remove these wet clothes and get her into something dry." Adam hesitated. "Right, of course," he muttered, then glanced at his own soaked attire. He'd never let a stranger stay in his home without calling an ambulance or sending them to a hospital. Yet the phone lines were unreliable in this storm, and deep down he wanted to keep this situation private until he understood it fully. Water trickled from his hair onto his brow, and he realized he was still shivering. "Martha, I'll go change. You handle what you can for her. Let me know if she comes around." He paused, raking a hand through his damp hair. "Be gentle," Martha nodded, her expression both empathetic and curious. "Yes, sir, I'll come find you if she wakes." Retreating to his own suite, Adam shrugged off his soaked blazer, shirt and shoes. As he changed into a dry sweater and pants, questions pounded his mind. Why had this unknown woman come to his private estate in the middle of such a storm? And why on earth was she clutching the exact folder he'd lost at Le Jardin? He pulled a small medical kit from a bathroom cabinet and returned to the guest room. He found Martha tending to a minor cut on the woman's forehead, having already dressed her in a soft cotton robe. "The bleeding is superficial," Martha reported. "Nothing to worry about. She's just exhausted and probably a bit bruised from whatever caused her to collapse." Adam nodded, stepping closer. The woman's face was peaceful yet etched with tension, as if she'd been fighting her own battles, even while unconscious. A faint bruise on her arm hinted at a rough tumble. He felt an unsettling pang in his chest, something akin to guilt. He had no idea who she was, but she might have been in an accident on his property road, the same place where he nearly missed seeing her in time. Rain continued to batter the windows, and a nearby flash of lightning lit the room for a moment. Adam glanced at the folder that now lay on a nearby chair, pages inside crinkled from moisture. He resisted the urge to inspect it immediately. For once, he prioritized the well-being of another person over business matters. "I'll stay here with her," Adam said quietly, gesturing for Martha to step out. "Thank you, Martha." Before she left, Martha gave him a look of genuine warmth. "I haven't seen you this concerned in a long time," she said gently. "There's something about helping a stranger that can reveal a different side of a person, Mr. Donovan." Alone with the still unconscious woman, Adam pulled a plush chair up to the bed. He noticed small details. Her lashes, dark and flecked with droplets, her skin pale but somehow vibrant, and a faint scent of rain mixing with the clean fragrance of the robe. His mind flickered back to the precarious image of her lying on the roadside. A wave of relief washed over him, seeing that she seemed stable now. Outside, thunder rolled again, but inside, the house was quiet. Adam watched the rhythm of her breathing, surprised at how unnerved he felt. He usually approached challenges in life with methodical detachment, but this was different. A stranger's fate lay in his hands, and for reasons he couldn't explain, he found himself deeply invested in her recovery. Morning light struggled through the storm clouds as Elena Reeves stirred in the plush guest bed, blinking at the unfamiliar surroundings. A wave of disorientation washed over her before she remembered the thunder, the slick roads, and the jolting skid of her car. She sat up abruptly, ignoring the dull ache in her head. Her eyes landed on a tall, broad-shouldered man standing near the window, arms folded. She recognized him instantly. "You're Adam Donovan," she said, voice raspy from fatigue. Adam glanced over with cautious curiosity. He'd been watching the windows, where rain still tapped against the glass, though more gently than the night before. "Yes," he answered, stepping closer. "I'm Adam Donovan." "And you are—" "Elena Reeves," she replied, lifting a hand to her bandaged forehead. She winced. "Where am I?" "You're in one of my guest suites," he said, his tone measured. "I found you unconscious outside my estate late last night." She glanced around, taking in the elegant furniture and the subtle glow from the crystal lamps. Then her gaze settled on the folder perched on a nearby chair. Straightening her shoulders, she locked eyes with him. "I came to return something of yours." Adam nodded, noticing the flicker of resolve in her brown eyes. She looked younger than he'd first guessed, perhaps 34, yet her expression carried a determined intensity. Her dark hair fell around her shoulders in damp waves. "So it seems," he acknowledged. "You have my folder. How did you get it?" Elena pressed her lips together and took a slow breath. "I'm the new manager at Le Jardin, the restaurant near your property. Last night, I was closing up when I noticed the folder you'd left behind. It has important financial documents about some hotel deal. I tried to call the number you left with us, but the lines were spotty because of the storm. I thought I'd just drive over and drop it off since it's urgent." She paused, rubbing her temple. "I didn't expect the roads to be so slippery." Adam blinked, his guarded expression softening slightly. He recalled how she'd been clutching the folder even as she lay unconscious. "You managed to get here," he said quietly. "But then, what happened?" Elena frowned, the memory returning in disjointed fragments. "My car slid near the entrance, lost traction in the rain. I guess I must have hit my head and blacked out before I could press the gate's intercom." A silence settled between them as each absorbed the implications. Adam's mind spun. He couldn't ignore that this woman had put herself at risk to do something responsible, maybe even honorable. It challenged his usual assumption that people rarely acted with such integrity unless they had an angle. He cleared his throat. "You should have called an ambulance instead of driving," he said, though he knew that if the roles were reversed, he might have done the same thing. Elena gave a weary laugh. "I was worried you'd miss a critical meeting if those documents got leaked or fell into the wrong hands. People talk, Mr. Donovan, and your name carries weight. I didn't want to be the reason a deal went sideways, or the reason your proprietary information got scattered." Adam felt both appreciation and embarrassment mingle in his chest. For a moment, the cold, businesslike persona he wore slipped. "Well, thank you," he said, unsure what else to say. Elena's eyes traveled across the luxurious bedroom. "You're not the kind of man I expected." He stiffened. "And what did you expect?" "Someone more distant," she admitted, then shrugged. "But you brought me inside rather than just calling 911. That tells me you're not exactly the ruthless mogul people make you out to be. Adam's gaze flickered, a muscle tensing in his jaw. I prefer handling matters directly. I don't like leaving things to chance. She carefully swung her legs over the side of the bed, testing her balance. Well, I appreciate that, especially last night. This place is extravagant, but I wouldn't have guessed it'd feel so safe. He stepped back, giving her space. Outside, the rain began to taper off. Inside, an unspoken tension filled the air. Adam realized that in less than 24 hours, his carefully controlled world had shifted. Elena, a woman he'd never met before, had challenged more than his routine. She'd challenged his perspective. And if the steady, searching look in her eyes was any indication, the transformation had only begun. The power flickered just as Elena and Adam were finishing a quiet conversation in the mansion's expansive living room. With a sudden pop, every light shut off, plunging the corridors into darkness. Outside, the storm still raged, though less violently than before. Elena stood by a tall window, lightning occasionally illuminating her reflective silhouette. The silence that followed the power outage made her heartbeat sound impossibly loud in her own ears. "Generator must have failed," Adam muttered, grabbing the flashlight he kept on a side table. His voice held a tinge of annoyance. He was unaccustomed to technology failing in his meticulously maintained home. He tilted the beam of light across the wide room, guiding Elena toward the kitchen. "Let's see if there's any chance of getting the backup circuits online," he said. Martha crossed their path, her tone practical and calm. "Mr. Donovan, we have extra lanterns and candles stored in the pantry. I'll bring them out so you're not completely in the dark." Elena nodded, offering a grateful smile. Though her forehead still bore a slight ache from her mishap on the road, she felt compelled to be helpful. "I can check the cabinets, maybe put something together for dinner," she suggested, remembering the storm had kept them both from eating a proper meal. Adam directed his flashlight around the massive kitchen, a space equipped with state-of-the-art appliances that seemed rarely used. Opening a sleek stainless steel fridge, he realized with some embarrassment that he had no idea how to prepare a meal in his own home. He paused, stepping aside for Elena as she pulled out fresh vegetables and various ingredients. "You know," she teased gently, "most gourmet kitchens in big mansions are more for show. But we can improvise. I've worked in restaurants across the country, so one dinner in the dark won't scare me." Minutes later, the flicker of lanterns and candles lent a soft glow to the marble countertops, casting dancing shadows. Rain continued its rhythmic tap against the windows, while thunder rumbled in the distance. Elena moved with quiet confidence, chopping herbs and sautéing onions in a pan she found tucked in a lower cabinet. Meanwhile, Adam searched through a nearby wine refrigerator and emerged with a vintage bottle. He carefully wiped off a thin layer of dust on the label. "This is a 1990 Chateau Margaux," he said, holding it up to the candlelight. "I've been saving it, but I suppose if there's ever a time for a special occasion, this might be it." Elena flicked her gaze between him and the wine, amused. "Only you would call a blackout in a rainstorm a special occasion," she said with a half-smile, but there was warmth beneath her teasing. Once the meal was ready, simple roasted chicken and vegetables served with freshly toasted bread, Adam led her to the formal dining room, which looked surprisingly grand by candlelight. A long table that easily seated 12 felt almost too large for just the two of them. But as they settled in side by side, a sense of intimacy filled the emptiness. The flames dancing on the polished wood cast gentle reflections on the walls. They clinked glasses in a muted toast. The wine's aroma mingled with the savory scents from dinner, creating a cocoon of warmth. At first, they ate quietly, savoring each bite in comfortable silence. Adam finally broke the hush. "Not many people have ever seen me like this," he confessed. "Off my game, sitting in the dark, not fully in control." Elena studied his face by candlelight, the flicker revealing lines of stress around his eyes that she hadn't noticed before. "Does being in control always matter that much?" He looked down at the lacework of candle shadows on the table. "I grew up watching my father struggle to provide. We lived day to day. Control became my way to ensure I'd never feel helpless again." She took another sip of wine, her gaze thoughtful. "I understand. My parents died in an accident when I was young, and it shattered my sense of security. I guess that's why I learned to take every detail into my own hands, right down to returning a folder in a thunderstorm." Adam swallowed, feeling a twinge of guilt. "I owe you for that, and for this meal." He raised his glass again. "To surviving storms, both the ones outside and the ones we carry within." Their eyes locked, and for a moment, the storm raging beyond the windows seemed distant. The candlelit dinner had turned into something far more meaningful, a shared reminder that sometimes being plunged into darkness is the only way to truly see what matters. Late that evening, a hush fell over the mansion, punctuated only by the lingering drip of rain from the eaves. With the power partially restored, Adam guided Elena into a space she hadn't yet explored, a grand library on the mansion's second floor. A mahogany spiral staircase curved along the shelves, which rose nearly to the ceiling. The scent of old leather and paper hung in the air. Elena stepped inside, eyes widening. "I had no idea you had this many books," she murmured. Floor-to-ceiling windows on one side revealed only darkness, but she could imagine a breathtaking view of the property when daylight came. Adam shrugged, a hint of sheepishness in his expression. "I collect them, but I don't read as often as I'd like. Some are just for show, others, well, they remind me of where I came from. I taught myself a lot by reading used books I found in thrift stores when I was young." He paused to flip on a dim lamp, revealing rows of titles organized by genre. Elena's gaze caught on a leather-bound copy of Ek Anna Karenina. She pulled it out carefully. "Tolstoy," she said softly. "Have you read this one?" Adam's lips twitched, almost smiling. "Not fully. Started it once. Then business demanded all my time." She turned the book over in her hands. "It's about people trapped by societal obligations and longing for something more. Love, duty, morality, big stuff. I remember reading it in college and feeling so torn by the characters' dilemmas." Adam studied her a moment. "Did you ever feel that way in your own life, trapped by duty?" Elena exhaled slowly. "I guess I felt obligated to make something of myself. After my parents died, my younger sister Sophie and I were practically alone, except for a few distant relatives. I found a purpose in culinary school, but living in New York was relentless. Eventually, I realized that just chasing prestige wasn't enough. So, I took a chance managing a restaurant in Chicago. Something about this city felt more grounded." Running a hand along the spines of the books, Adam spoke quietly. "I used to dream of finishing every classic novel on these shelves, but there was always another deal to close, another expansion to plan." He looked at her. "My father was from the South Side, worked in a metal shop. He told me education was my ticket out. I think that idea, well, it got mixed up with money." They settled on a pair of leather armchairs arranged near a fireplace. Adam flicked a switch, and a soft flame came to life behind a glass panel. Warmth and subtle light spilled across the marble hearth. Elena thumbed through the pages of Anna Karenina, taking comfort in the gentle crackle of the fire. "Sometimes," Adam began, "I wonder if all this," he gestured at the opulent surroundings, "is just a shell, Something to prove I made it, but who am I proving it to? My father's gone. Half of the people who said I wouldn't amount to anything aren't even around anymore. Yet I keep pushing, keep building towers of glass. For what? Elena closed the book and leaned forward, sincerity etched on her face. That's a heavy question, one I think everyone reaches eventually, some sooner, some later. You've accomplished more than most people ever will, but maybe you need to ask yourself if it's truly fulfilling. A beat of silence lingered between them. The shadows of the fire flickered, illuminating the uncertainty in Adam's eyes. She saw his guarded composure soften, revealing a man more complex than the ruthless businessman she'd heard rumors about. I came here, she continued, running away from my own ghosts, hoping a new environment might help me reinvent myself. But I never expected to find someone else facing the same question. He met her gaze, surprise laced with an odd sense of camaraderie. Running or searching? Maybe both, she answered. Sometimes you have to lose your way to realize what really matters. Adam's phone buzzed on the library table, Jessica texting updates on the Wilcott building negotiations. The reminder of corporate demands made him grimace. He silenced the phone. In the glow of the fireplace, they continued talking, each confession bridging the gap between their worlds. Among the hushed rows of books, they discovered a shared vulnerability, an acknowledgement that perhaps they were both looking for something neither had fully named. And on a night still tinged by the storm's residue, the quiet library walls bore witness to truths neither of them had dared speak aloud before. By early morning, the storm clouds had thinned, revealing pale sunlight over Adam's expansive estate. The mansion's corridors glowed with fresh, rain-washed light. As Elena wandered, she found herself drawn to a locked door near the end of a hallway. Curiosity nudged her to try the handle. To her surprise, it turned, and the heavy door creaked open. Inside was a room clearly devoted to music. Instruments stood carefully arranged, violins, a cello, even a harp in the corner, collecting a fine layer of dust. Dominating the center was a grand Steinway piano covered with a protective cloth. Tall windows overlooked the gardens, still dotted with puddles from the previous night. Elena stepped in, eyes roaming. She noticed framed photos along one wall. A young Adam, barely in his 20s, seated at a smaller, upright piano, wearing a hesitant smile. Another photo showed a middle-aged woman standing beside him, presumably a piano teacher. On a nearby bookshelf lay sheet music volumes, edges yellowed by disuse. A soft voice sounded behind her. I haven't opened this room in years. She spun around to see Adam in the doorway. His expression was guarded, as though she'd uncovered a secret he wasn't sure he was ready to share. I'm sorry, Elena said quietly. I wasn't snooping, He held up a hand, shaking his head. No need to apologize. I never locked it to keep people out. More to keep my memories contained. She studied him, noticing how his shoulders tensed at the threshold. You used to play, Adam nodded, stepping forward. He paused by the piano, resting a hand on the cloth. When I was a teenager, I worked odd jobs to afford lessons from a local teacher, Mrs. Jenkins. She believed I had real talent. He shrugged as if discarding the notion. Then life got complicated, and I had to choose between practicing piano and working extra shifts to pay bills. Eventually, business overshadowed music entirely. Gently, Elena removed the cloth to reveal polished ebony. A swirl of dust floated in the morning light. Do you ever miss it? His face flickered with a hint of longing. Sometimes, he admitted, but I've told myself it's a waste of time. No monetary gain, no furthering of my goals. Elena raised an eyebrow, remembering the passion in his voice when he spoke about achievements. Not everything in life has to revolve around profit. Adam sighed, looking genuinely conflicted. I know. That was just the only measure of success I understood for a long time. She gestured toward the piano bench, inviting him to sit. He hesitated, then lowered himself onto the cushion. The wood creaked slightly, as if welcoming him back. Heart pounding, he placed his hands on the keys. At first, a stiff chord echoed in the room, dissonant from years of neglect. But he tried again, coaxing out a gentle arpeggio. Despite the dust on the keys, the Steinway's tone was rich and resonant. Elena leaned on the side of the piano, watching him struggle through a section of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. He stumbled over a few notes but continued, determined. Slowly, the melody took shape, weaving a wistful lullaby through the sunlit room. When he finished, an unsteady hush followed. Elena felt a tightness in her throat. "Adam, that was beautiful. You still have it in you." He exhaled a breath he seemed to have been holding for years. "I'd forgotten how this feels." "Elena," he began, turning on the bench to face her, "I've spent so long believing that success equals never looking back. But every note I play, I realize how much I've missed and how much of myself I've buried." She reached out, laying a hand on his shoulder. "Maybe it's time to unbury it." A faint tear glistened at the corner of Adam's eye before he blinked it away. He couldn't recall the last time he'd felt so raw, so exposed. Elena didn't look at him with pity or judgment, but rather a quiet understanding. In that moment, the music in the air spoke volumes neither could put into words. For Adam, it was the first true note of a new composition, one that was as much about rediscovering lost passions as it was about breaking down the walls he had spent his life constructing. Later that afternoon, Elena decided to whip up a light brunch in the mansion's sprawling kitchen. Natural daylight poured through the high windows, illuminating marble countertops and stainless steel appliances. She hummed softly, mentally sorting through a mental checklist of ingredients. Though she still felt a mild tenderness in her head from the prior night's accident, cooking had always been her solace. She reached for a paring knife to slice tomatoes, but her grip slipped. The blade nicked her index finger, sending a sharp sting through her hand. Elena hissed in pain as a bright bead of blood welled up. Adam appeared in the doorway, his senses attuned after hearing her startled gasp. Without hesitating, he rushed forward. "Let me see," he said, taking hold of her wrist with surprising gentleness. "I'm okay," she replied defensively, but the sting made her wince. Adam guided her to the sink, carefully rinsing the cut under cool water. Martha entered at that moment, concern etched on her features. Adam waved her off with a calm expression. "I've got this, Martha. Could you bring me the first aid kit from the pantry?" Martha nodded and swiftly returned with a neat, fully stocked kit. Adam selected gauze and an antiseptic wipe, tending to Elena's cut with a deftness she found unexpected. "You're surprisingly good at this," she murmured. He offered a faint smile, busy wrapping her finger. "I learned first aid years ago because of insurance requirements for my hotels. Then I realized it was just useful knowledge to have." Elena flexed her hand after he finished. "Thanks," she said softly, meeting his gaze. Something fluttered in her chest as she glimpsed his expression, an odd mix of concern, relief, and lingering guilt. They moved to a small breakfast table by the window. Warm sunlight made the room glow, a stark contrast to the raging storm that had forced them together only a day ago. Adam noticed her trying to avoid putting pressure on her freshly bandaged finger. "Let me handle the rest of the slicing," he offered. She allowed herself a short laugh. "All right, but no injuries allowed under your watch." Adam's movements were precise as he chopped tomatoes and fresh basil. Elena observed him with growing intrigue. For years, she'd heard rumors. Adam Donovan was the unfeeling mogul who crushed obstacles underfoot. Yet here he stood, slicing vegetables, a small bandage on her finger testifying to his unexpected kindness. Between motions of the knife, Adam pulled up the sleeve of his sweater, exposing a faint scar on his left forearm. Elena's curiosity piqued. What happened there? His posture stiffened slightly. It was years ago, he explained. I worked in a metal shop at 16, after school. An accident with a piece of sheet metal. I was careless, too busy worrying about bills to pay attention. She glanced at the thin, silvery line that he wore like a hidden marker of the past. I have a few scars myself, she admitted, showing him a faint mark on her chin. A bike accident when I was 10. My sister Sophie dared me to ride down this steep hill in Brooklyn. One wrong move and, well, gravity took over. Adam found himself chuckling at the imagery. So you've always been daring? She leaned back in her chair. I had to be. Life doesn't often knock politely on the door. It breaks it down. You either hide or learn to push back. For a moment, they sat quietly, each reflecting on the memories etched into their skin. It struck Elena how sharing something so small, a cut on the finger, a long-ago scar, could lead to an unexpectedly intimate connection. She wondered how many others had glimpsed Adam's vulnerabilities. Judging by his demeanor, the answer was probably very few. Finally, Adam cleared his throat. The roads might open up again soon, but the news says there's still some flooding in places. You might have to stay another day or two. Elena nodded, uncertain whether the idea of leaving so soon filled her with relief or something akin to regret. She tapped her bandaged finger gently on the table. We'll deal with that when we come to it. For now, I'd like to keep cooking, if you don't mind the help. He handed her the chopped tomatoes with a cautious smile. I suppose there's no harm in that. Just be careful with the knives. An unspoken warmth lingered in the air. The mansion's cold grandeur softened a touch each time they revealed a piece of themselves, however small. Sometimes, Elena mused, it's precisely those minor injuries that open the door to healing wounds buried far deeper. With the skies clearing outside, soft afternoon light brightened the mansion's living spaces. After lunch, Elena and Adam found themselves in a spacious sitting room near the back of the house. A glass wall offered a sweeping view of the gardens, still drenched and glistening. They settled onto a comfortable sofa, and Martha brought them tea before quietly disappearing, leaving them alone with their thoughts. Elena sipped from her teacup, noticing Adam's gaze wandering to a row of framed photographs on a nearby table. She rose and walked over, picking up one of the pictures. It showed a young Adam standing in front of a modest brick building. A faint sign in the corner read, Donovan Inn. This was your first hotel? She asked, intrigued. He nodded, setting his own teacup aside. Barely more than a roadside motel, really. I bought it at 25 with every penny I'd saved plus a hefty loan. Cleaned the rooms myself some nights. Handed out flyers to drum up business. It was tough, but I was determined. Elena studied the photo more closely. I can see it in your eyes. You already had that drive to prove something. His jaw tightened slightly. I guess I believed if I just kept pushing, I'd never slide back into the desperation of my childhood. My father died when I was in college, and I had no real safety net. Every success felt like winning a battle, especially after so many told me I'd never make it. She placed the frame down gently. And now you own a global chain, from what I understand. Adam exhaled a humorless laugh. Yes, Donovan Luxury Hotels. We've got properties in multiple states, plus a few international expansions. But, you know, it's not all smooth sailing. This new deal, acquiring the Wilcott building, has a growing list of opponents who want it preserved as a landmark. Elena remembered the folder she'd so carefully tried to return. You must see why they're concerned. Historic buildings hold memories and stories worth keeping. He shrugged, though his eyes flickered with conflict. I try to balance respect for the past with the city's growth, yet sometimes old walls have to come down for something new to rise. That's business. They fell silent, and she returned to the sofa. Speaking of old walls, Elena said, a wistful note in her voice. I lived in a cramped apartment in Brooklyn with my parents and younger sister Sophie. We spent Sundays cooking big family meals. Those were the best days. She paused, remembering. But after our parents died, it was like everything crumbled. Sophie and I managed, but it felt like we'd lost the foundation that kept us together. Adam's expression softened. I'm sorry, I lost my father, but not both parents. I can't imagine. Elena nodded gratefully. Life made me grow up fast. I poured my energy into cooking, culinary school in New York, short stints in high-end restaurants, always pushing to be the best I could be. Eventually, I realized chasing status in the industry wasn't bringing me peace, so I left, searching for a place where I could do what I love without losing my sense of purpose. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, studying her with genuine interest. And that led you to Chicago? She shrugged. Sort of. I heard the restaurant near your property, Le Jardin, was under new ownership and needed a fresh start. The city itself has a certain grit and warmth. Felt like a place where I could build something meaningful instead of just chasing stars or Michelin ratings. A gentle hush followed, broken only by the distant drip of water off the eaves. Elena turned to Adam, noticing he seemed pensive, as though her words resonated more deeply than he let on. Eventually, he cleared his throat. Building something meaningful, he echoed, glancing at the dusty piano they'd discovered earlier. It's strange how we chase achievements, but sometimes we miss the meaning that comes from things we can't measure, like family, memories, or even the power of a storm to bring two strangers together. She looked at him, touched by the candor in his voice. We can't always quantify the important stuff, she agreed. Adam offered a faint smile and reached for his tea again. Outside, a patch of sunlight broke through the thinning clouds, casting a warm glow across the manicured lawns. It felt like a peaceful interlude, a shared pause in the middle of life's uncertainties. Together, they sat in that quiet space, steeped in the stories of how they each became who they were, wondering, perhaps, how those stories might change now that their paths had intersected. By late afternoon, the calm after the storm seemed almost serene. The mansion's grandeur felt less imposing in the gentle sunshine streaming through expansive windows. Elena found herself in Adam's office, a space she'd only glimpsed briefly before. Its minimalist design was dominated by a massive glass desk overlooking the lush grounds. Adam paced by the window, phone clutched in his hand. He'd just finished a tense call with an associate. Setting the phone down, he turned to Elena, an apologetic frown creasing his brow. I'm sorry you had to hear all that. Elena crossed her arms, sensing the tension swirling through him. You're facing a lot of pressure, aren't you? He nodded, eyes drifting to the damp folder on the edge of the desk, the very folder she had risked so much to return. Investors are pushing to finalize the Wilcott building acquisition as soon as possible. They want to see the property leveled and rebuilt into a boutique concept that maximizes profits. She studied him closely. What about the preservationists? Adam exhaled, frustration evident in his voice. Their stance is that the Wilcott building represents part of Chicago's heritage, old architecture with historical significance. But from a business standpoint, it's falling apart. Renovating it to meet modern codes would cut deeply into our margins. He paused, then ran a hand through his neatly trimmed hair. Look, I've built my career on making tough decisions. This is just another one. Elena noticed how his entire posture stiffened, as if bracing for conflict. She stepped closer, her eyes unwavering. But what if tearing it down means losing something irreplaceable to the community? Doesn't that matter? His jaw tightened. In my world, the bottom line often decides what matters. There was a trace of bitterness in his tone. I know how that sounds, ruthless maybe, but if I keep giving ground, I'll lose my investors' confidence. And once I lose that, everything I've built could unravel. Elena felt a surge of indignation. She recalled nights spent perfecting menus, ensuring every dish did justice to the culinary traditions she cherished. I get that business involves tough calls, but this city you claim to love is more than a profit center. The Wilcott building isn't just bricks and mortar. It's people's memories, their stories. You can't put a price on that. He shot her a sharp look. You're making it sound black and white. It's not. Either I compromise the expansion plan or I risk my entire network. So many jobs and futures hinge on Donovan Hotel's success. She shook her head, frustration mounting. Seems like you already made up your mind. Profits first. The same mentality that led you to push your staff at Le Jardin so hard when you visited. Everyone talked about how you demanded perfection without understanding what they were going through. She regretted the harshness the moment it left her lips, but didn't retract it. Adam's stare hardened. I push because that's what it takes to succeed in a competitive world. You wouldn't understand how precarious it was when I started from nothing. Elena cut him off, anger flaring. Don't presume what I understand. I've been on my own since I was 18, working in cutthroat New York kitchens to survive. Her voice trembled slightly with emotion. I'm not naive, but I also believe there's a line between ambition and bulldozing over what's right. The office fell silent. Their breathing quickened, both grappling with an unexpected intensity in the exchange. Outside, sunlight glinted on the damp leaves, mocking the tension inside the room. Adam turned away, pressing a palm against the window. He didn't speak for several seconds, his back to Elena. At last, he said in a low tone, "This is my life's work. I can't jeopardize it just because it offends someone's sense of nostalgia." Elena stared at him, fighting a swell of disbelief. So that's it. All your talk about missing the music in your life, how we chase emptiness, does none of it matter when it comes to real decisions? He spun around, inner conflict written across his features. I didn't say that. But maybe not everyone can afford to live by ideals. Some of us have responsibilities, real ones, that demand certain sacrifices. Emotions clashed in Elena's chest. She stood there, feeling the space between them grow wider. The storm outside had passed, but a new storm brewed inside the Donovan mansion, a storm of moral choices and clashing values. She realized that if she stayed any longer, she risked saying something they both might regret. Without another word, she left the office, the echo of her footsteps trailing down the hallway. Adam remained by the window, staring out at the sunlit gardens. For the first time in years, he was forced to confront the stark question of what truly mattered, and he wasn't entirely sure he liked the answer forming in his mind. A tentative hush settled over the mansion the next morning, an uneasy echo of the storm's aftermath. Rain clouds still lingered outside, though less menacingly, and faint rays of light peeked through tall windows. Elena stood in the foyer, gazing at the now unlocked gates visible at the end of the long driveway. Water ran in rivulets along the asphalt, suggesting the roads might finally be passable. She found herself uncertain whether she wanted them to be. After the heated argument in Adam's office, the very thought of staying under the same roof felt claustrophobic, yet the idea of leaving him, leaving this strange bubble they'd created, ignited a twinge of regret in her chest. Instead of confronting her emotions, she busied herself in the kitchen, quietly arranging bowls and utensils as though preparing to cook again. In truth, Adam, too, wrestled with the tension. Upstairs in his private office, he paced back and forth, phone in hand, ignoring calls from some of his board members. He kept replaying Elena's words about the Wilcott building and about chasing profit at the expense of heritage. Her accusation had cut deeper than he cared to admit. The conversation had turned personal far too quickly, and now he questioned the lines he had drawn, lines that once seemed so unshakable. Martha, ever watchful, sensed the unspoken strain. She found Eleanor at the kitchen counter, chopping vegetables with more force than necessary. "My dear, are you sure you want to prepare another meal right now?" she asked gently. Eleanor set down the knife, her shoulders slumping. "I need to do something productive," she murmured. "It's better than sitting alone with my thoughts." Martha patted her arm with a maternal kindness. "Sometimes you both need space, but sometimes a conversation can clear the air faster than any silence." Elena offered a faint, weary smile. "He's not exactly an easy man to approach, especially after last night." Upstairs, Adam stared at the folder that had caused so much trouble. Its edges were still warped from the rain. He remembered Elena's conviction as she spoke about preserving something irreplaceable. Was he truly so heartless? Or had he convinced himself that every moral compromise was simply part of success? He left the office, nearly colliding with Martha in the hallway. She looked at him with knowing eyes. "She's in the kitchen, sir," she said softly. "But be gentle. She's trying to figure things out just like you are." Adam stiffened in mild irritation. Sometimes he resented how well Martha knew him, but deep down he valued her intuition. Yet instead of going to the kitchen, he slipped away to the library, hoping to gather his thoughts in the comforting hush of the books. There, the memory of playing piano for Elena lingered. He felt a pang, recalling how vulnerable he had allowed himself to be, only to clash with her soon after. By midday, Elena had prepared an impressive spread of roasted vegetables and chicken, perhaps more elaborate than necessary. She set the table in the ornate dining room, hoping it might coax Adam out of hiding. But as minutes stretched into an hour, no footsteps approached. The food lay untouched, steam dwindling into cold air. Frustrated, she found a container and packed up the meal, placing it in the refrigerator. The act felt symbolic, an offering of peace rebuffed by silence. She retreated to the gardens, weaving through damp pathways as the clouds overhead slowly began to break. Drops of rain still clung to rose petals, and the earthy scent of wet soil enveloped her. Each step echoed with the question, should she stay or go? Meanwhile, Adam hovered by a library window, gazing at the same gardens from a distance. He saw her solitary figure near a small fountain, but couldn't summon the courage to approach. Instead, he replayed his own father's warnings about letting emotions cloud business judgment. Duty and success had always been his guiding stars. The hush between them grew heavier with each passing moment. Afternoon light softened into evening glow. Two people under one roof, both deeply affected by the other's presence, now drifting into separate corners of the house. Around dinner time, the roads officially reopened, radio reports confirming that floodwaters had receded. Still, Elena did not rush to pack her things, and Adam did not urge her to leave. In the sprawling Donovan mansion, once so immaculate and carefully ordered, an emotional storm loomed. They were both caught in that tense calm after the thunder, each waiting for the other to make a move, speak a word, break the silence. Night crept in, bringing with it a hush that settled over every corridor. Though the worst of the physical storm had passed, a different tempest swirled within Adam and Elena, weighing on their hearts. As Elena stood at one of the mansion's tall windows, she noticed an odd flicker of light coming from the direction of the kitchen. Fearing a power surge, she hurried across the darkened hallways. Her pulse jolted at the sight of smoke wafting up near the stove. A tea towel she'd left on the counter had ignited against a hot burner, sending flames licking toward the backsplash. Without a second thought, she grabbed a pot lid and tried to smother the fire, but panic gripped her when it refused to die down immediately. Suddenly, Adam burst into the kitchen, drawn by the scent of smoke. "Move!" he barked, quickly finding a fire extinguisher near the fridge. A blast of foam covered the flames, dousing them in seconds. The room filled with an acrid smell, and Elena coughed into her sleeve. Relief broke over them both as the crisis ended almost as soon as it began. Heart pounding, Elena leaned against the counter. I'm sorry," she stammered. "I wasn't paying attention. I was heating water for tea and forgot about the towel." Adam exhaled heavily, setting the extinguisher aside. "Are you hurt?" "No," she replied softly, shaken. Her eyes drifted over the charred remnants of the towel. It wasn't a huge fire, yet it had startled her enough to realize how her thoughts had been elsewhere. Martha appeared in the doorway, worry etched on her face. "What happened? Are you two okay?" Adam nodded. "Yes, just a minor flare-up. We'll air the place out." Despite the adrenaline, his voice carried a gentler note than usual. "Martha, could you open the windows? Let's get the smoke out." Once Martha stepped away, an awkward silence settled. Elena realized her hands were shaking. She glanced at Adam, who was regarding her with concern rather than anger. It was disarming, a flicker of the man who had cradled her in his arms the night of the storm. Her throat felt tight. "Thank you for jumping in." He studied her face, every line of tension evident. "I'm just relieved you're all right." The hush between them lingered before he added quietly, "And I'm sorry too." She frowned, confusion mixing with lingering fear. "For what?" He ran a hand over his hair, shoulders sagging. "For last night? I shouldn't have spoken to you that way. I got defensive, and that's no excuse." Eleanor drew a shaky breath. "I wasn't exactly gentle either. It's just, I know what it's like when dreams or traditions are crushed for the sake of profits. Cooking is more than just food for me. It's part of my family's story. So seeing old buildings, old places, being torn down, that hits home." Adam rested his palms on the counter, nodding slowly. "I grew up with so little. I thought success meant never compromising on forward progress. But what if that forward progress erases the roots of a community?" He paused, glancing at her. "You made me question that, and it scares me, because changing how I do business could risk everything I've built." Her eyes softened. "Maybe it's a risk worth taking, or at least worth exploring. Isn't that what leadership is? Making choices that help more than just you or your bottom line." He considered her words in the smoky quiet of the kitchen, the overhead lights casting stark shadows. "I was going through some old plans before I came down," he confessed. "One of my architects once pitched a design that preserved much of the Wilcott building's original facade. It wasn't as profitable, but it had potential." He hesitated, then shrugged. "I shelved it because it felt too complicated." Elena felt a small flutter of hope. "Maybe you can revisit it." Adam gave a short nod. "Maybe." The single word hung in the air like a bridge between them. They spent the next few minutes cleaning up remnants of the minor accident, opening windows, wiping soot from the stove. Eventually, Adam set a kettle on properly, double-checking every detail. As steam slowly rose, Elena realized the moment had become more than fire cleanup. It was a turning point, a chance to mend the fragile bond that had nearly shattered under the weight of their opposing views. Standing side by side in the smoky afterglow, they exchanged a tentative look. No grand declarations passed between them, but for the first time since their argument, they shared a sincere sense of mutual respect that transcended words. Later that evening, a hush of renewed calm spread through the mansion. The windows, once battered by rain, now offered a tranquil view of a moonlit sky. In the softly lit dining room, Adam and Elena dined together at last, leftovers from the afternoon's unconsumed meal, gently reheated but still rich with flavor. They spoke in measured tones, carefully avoiding the raw nerves that had frayed earlier. As they finished the last bites of chicken and vegetables, Adam excused himself briefly, returning with an opened bottle of wine. "Nothing as rare as the Chateau Margaux," he remarked wryly, pouring it into 2 slender glasses, "but hopefully enough to mark a peaceful evening." Eleanor studied his face. He seemed freer somehow, as if confronting the conflict had allowed him to breathe again. "After this afternoon's scare, I'll take a quiet night over anything fancy," she said, lifting her glass. "To no more fires." "To no more fires," he echoed, clinking his glass with hers. The slight smile they shared seemed to melt some of the tension still lingering from their argument. They moved to the living room, where a fireplace crackled gently. Elena found herself settling into a plush armchair while Adam chose the piano bench nearby, though he made no move to play. They sipped wine in a contemplative silence before Elena spoke. "I keep thinking about why I left New York. It wasn't just the hectic environment. It was that everything felt transactional. My life was consumed by culinary achievements, Michelin stars and magazine features. I was proud, but I also felt empty." She set her glass down, gaze distant. "I wanted something real, something that didn't revolve around status." Adam's expression flickered with empathy. "I can relate more than I'd like to admit. I've been chasing this empire so long, I forgot to ask myself if I even enjoy it. Sure, I'm proud of what I've built, but at what cost? A lonely mansion, colleagues who fear me more than respect me, and personal relationships that never seem to last." Elena arched a brow. "Seems we're both re-evaluating. Maybe that's why I ended up in Chicago. Or why you opened your door instead of calling an ambulance that night." He inhaled, letting the memories wash over him. "When I saw you lying in the rain, unconscious, I realized that no matter how much control I try to have, life can still flip everything upside down. And for once, I acted on instinct, human instinct, not business logic." She offered a small smile. "You know, you say you're ruthless. But from what I've seen, there's a lot more compassion in you than you let on." Adam's gaze dropped to the piano keys, where his fingertips traced along their smooth surface. "It's buried under years of telling myself vulnerability is weakness. That's what my father instilled in me after he worked so hard just to keep a roof over our heads." Eleanor leaned forward. "Maybe real strength comes from knowing when to be vulnerable." A heavy stillness filled the room, punctuated only by the crackle of the fireplace. Outside, a nearly full moon illuminated the manicured lawns, and a soft wind rustled the tree branches, far gentler than the roaring tempest that had brought Elena here. Adam reached for his wine again, struggling with words. "I might still lose the Wilcott building deal if I suggest a major redesign to accommodate preservation. Investors won't be thrilled. But after talking with you, I realize it's a risk I might be willing to take." Something in her chest fluttered, a rush of relief and respect for the man wrestling with his principles. "If that's the direction you choose," she said gently, "it'll be because you believe in something bigger than just profit, and that's not weakness, it's conviction." Their eyes met, and an unspoken invitation glimmered in the space between them. Elena hesitated, heat rising to her cheeks. As if sensing the moment's intensity, Adam set his glass down and moved from the piano bench to sit beside her. The shift in proximity made her heart pound, every nerve alert to his presence. He reached out, softly brushing a stray lock of hair from her forehead, where a faint bruise remained. "You risked so much coming here that night," he murmured. I'm starting to think the real risk is letting you leave without telling you just how much you've changed my perspective. She swallowed. I'm not sure if you realize how much you're changing mine. Their gazes locked, but before either could move closer, Adam's phone buzzed on the coffee table, an intrusive reminder of the corporate world beyond. He shot an apologetic look and silenced it. The moment lingered, charged with possibility. Even though it passed without the touch of lips or an embrace, the atmosphere crackled with an understanding that something profound had shifted. In that silent agreement, they realized they were standing on the edge of a shared discovery, the realization of what truly matters. Much later that same evening, the mansion's corridors seemed alive with moonlight streaming through tall windows. Elena felt restless, her mind buzzing with thoughts of everything that had happened since she arrived, the storm, the arguments, the surprising revelations. Seeking a moment of calm, she wandered outside to the gardens, where a soft breeze carried the scent of damp earth and night-blooming flowers. A winding stone path led her to a small courtyard area near a sculpted fountain. Water cascaded gently under the moon's glow, creating a tranquil hush that eased her unsettled spirit. She paused there, gazing into the fountain's rippling surface as if it might offer answers. Instead, it reflected her own uncertain expression. Footsteps sounded behind her. She turned to see Adam, hands in the pockets of a light jacket, stepping carefully along the path. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked, voice low in the warm summer night. She shook her head. "Too much on my mind." He studied her face, the silver moonlight highlighting the soft angles of her features. "Me too," he admitted. For a moment, they stood in companionable silence, the only sound the gentle trickle of water from the fountain's tears. Elena took a seat on a low stone bench. Adam joined her, leaving enough space to be polite, yet not so much that the gulf between them felt insurmountable. They were close enough that she could sense the warmth radiating from his body in the mild night air. "I've never quite lived through such a whirlwind," she said, watching a drop of water run down the side of the fountain. "I came here to drop off a folder, thinking it would be a quick errand, and now I'm rethinking my entire life." Adam exhaled a soft laugh. "Believe me, it's mutual. You challenged me in a way no one else has. Usually, people either avoid telling me things I don't want to hear, or they're too intimidated to speak up. You," he paused, searching for the right words. "You saw right through my armor." She turned to face him. A hush embraced them, the moon lending an almost ethereal aura to the manicured hedges and softly swaying trees around them. "It's not just me. You opened up more than I'd ever expect from, well, the Adam Donovan I read about in business magazines." He shifted, resting one hand on the edge of the bench. "That's the public me. The one I learned to show the world so I'd never appear weak or uncertain." They locked eyes. A quiet understanding passed between them. Carefully, as if testing a boundary, Elena set her hand near his. Their fingertips brushed, an electric spark in that single contact. Adam's heartbeat thudded in his ears. Without overthinking, he gently enfolded her hand in his. She felt the contrast of his large palm against hers, calloused in places from old manual labor he rarely mentioned. There was no dramatic music, no thunder or lightning this time. Just the steady murmur of the fountain and the whisper of a breeze rustling nearby foliage. Yet the significance of that simple handclasp was profound. It was the meeting of two people who, days ago, had been strangers, and who now seemed to hold some unspoken promise in their shared grasp. Elena's cheeks warmed, and she lowered her gaze for a moment. I don't quite know what this means," she admitted softly. Adam squeezed her hand gently. "Neither do I. Maybe it doesn't have to mean anything definitive right now. Just that we're here." That we're letting ourselves be here. She nodded, thoughts drifting to the restaurant she managed, the uncertain future of her career, and even her sister Sophie, who was expecting to hear updates soon. But for tonight, she allowed herself to exist in this moment. Under a canopy of stars, the quiet hush of water, and the comforting presence of the man beside her, she felt a glimmer of acceptance of the unknown path ahead. Finally, Adam cleared his throat. "I want to show you something," he murmured. Still holding her hand, he led her around the fountain to a small, neglected side path. At its end lay a wrought iron gate, locked for years. He jangled a set of old keys from his jacket pocket. When he unlocked and pushed the gate open, it revealed a section of the property overlooking the city lights of Chicago in the distance, glimmering like a sea of possibilities. "I used to come here when I first bought this place," Adam confessed. "I'd stand by the fence, dreaming about expanding my hotels. I haven't been back in ages. I guess I forgot to dream about anything but business." Elena leaned on the railing, her hand still in his. "Maybe it's time to dream again, about more than just hotels." They shared a lingering glance as a gentle wind swept past, carrying the promise of something they could only discover together. In that twilight hush, the meeting of their hands felt like a first step toward a future neither had fully imagined. Early the next morning, Elena awoke to find a stream of messages lighting up her phone. Her colleagues at Le Jardin had been trying to reach her, worried about her sudden absence. Among the unread texts was one from her sister Sophie, checking in from the East Coast with a concerned tone that made Elena's stomach twist. It was a stark reminder that real life hadn't paused while she was sequestered in Adam's estate. Downstairs, she discovered Adam already in his office, phone pressed to his ear. Through the open door, she could hear snippets of a terse conversation. "I understand," he said to someone on the line, "but I need more time. I'm not signing off on any demolition plan without reconsidering the alternatives." Elena hovered in the hallway, nerves aflutter. She sensed this was a pivotal discussion about the Wilcott building. Finally, Adam ended the call with a frustrated sigh. Catching sight of her, he straightened. "Morning," he greeted, forcing a polite smile. "I'm guessing you have a lot of messages too." She nodded, stepping into the office. "Le Jardin is worried. I should probably head back soon. I can't just vanish on them." His expression tightened slightly, a flash of regret crossing his face. "The roads are open now. Michael can drive you back whenever you want." Elena felt torn. The idea of stepping away from the emotional bubble they'd formed both relieved and pained her. "You're right," she finally said, voice subdued. "I owe it to my staff to show up." Adam ran a hand through his hair, tension visible in his posture. I wish we had more time, but I get it. Life doesn't just stop." Neither of them brought up the hand-holding in the moonlit garden or the quiet closeness they'd shared the night before. The world outside was intruding fast. Jessica's emails piled up, Robert Chen's calls demanded immediate answers, and Elena's restaurant responsibilities couldn't be ignored. Adam stood at his desk, scanning urgent memos, while Elena quietly collected her belongings from the guest suite. Each step felt heavier than she'd expected. When she returned downstairs, she found Adam waiting near the grand foyer with Michael at his side. The chauffeur cast a discreet glance at them both, picking up subtle tension in the air before stepping away to prepare the car. Adam handed Elena a folded piece of paper. "Here are some ideas I've been working on," he explained. "They're rough sketches of how we might preserve the Wilcott façade while still updating the interior for a boutique hotel. It's not finally, but I've started emailing architects to explore it." Elena scanned the page, heart clenching at this evidence of his newfound willingness to compromise. "This is a good start," she murmured, carefully tucking it into her bag. "Thank you for considering it." A silence stretched. Outside, the sleek black limousine waited, engine rumbling softly. Adam hesitated, then asked, "Would you, maybe, meet with me again to discuss the plans? You know, once you've settled back at the restaurant," her gaze lifted to his, warmth touching her voice. "I'd like that. I want to see how this develops." She paused. "And maybe we could talk about other things too." His relieved smile was tinged with regret. "That sounds good." He stepped forward, momentarily unsure what gesture was appropriate. A handshake felt too formal, a kiss too bold in front of his driver, so he gently clasped her hand, much like he had by the fountain. She squeezed back, a fleeting reassurance that whatever was happening between them wasn't just a dream conjured by a few days of forced proximity. With that, Elena moved toward the door, shoulders squared for the outside world. Adam followed, helping her into the limo. As Michael pulled away from the mansion, she glanced back through the tinted window. Adam stood on the marble steps, hands in his pockets, watching her depart. The golden light of morning outlined his figure, making him look both confident and strangely vulnerable. Inside the limo, Elena exhaled. She reminded herself that real life waited for her: the restaurant, her sister's calls, the uncertain future of her career. Yet in the quiet hum of the luxurious car, she couldn't shake the feeling that part of her remained at that mansion, tied to the man who had rescued her in a thunderstorm, and, in his own way, opened his guarded heart. At the same time, Adam lingered at the threshold, ignoring the phone vibrating in his pocket. Though the worlds they belonged to seemed poised to collide in complicated ways, business, personal, moral, he found himself strangely willing to face the impact. For the first time, he stood ready to let someone in, even if it meant risking the carefully crafted empire he had built. The next few days passed in a blur for Elena once she returned to Le Jardin. The restaurant staff flocked around her the instant she walked through the doors, peppering her with questions. She soothed their worries with a brisk explanation. She'd been caught in the storm and laid up at a nearby estate until the roads reopened. Curiosity lingered in their eyes, but Elena's calm assurance quieted further prying. Despite the staff's genuine relief at her return, she felt a hollow ache she couldn't name. She slipped back into routine, overseeing inventory, training new servers, tweaking seasonal menus, yet every task felt oddly colorless. Occasionally, she'd stop mid-chop or pause while plating a dish, mind drifting to Adam. Their goodbye at his mansion replayed in her thoughts, the way he'd looked standing on those marble steps, the folded paper with his revised ideas for the Wilcott building safely tucked in her bag. She tried to refocus on the present, but each evening she found herself scrolling through missed calls and messages, half expecting to see Adam's name. There were texts from Sophie, her 29-year-old sister in Brooklyn, who had heard about Elena's storm adventure and demanded details. Elena wrote back a short, cryptic reply. She didn't have the energy for a full confession, didn't fully understand it herself. Meanwhile, in the sleek offices of Donovan luxury hotels, Adam confronted his own wave of demands. Vanessa Powell, his 45-year-old vice president, noticed his distraction in meetings. He signed documents with unusual haste, sometimes asking her to repeat key points he'd have once remembered effortlessly. Late at night, alone in his corner office, Adam caught himself staring at the city lights, recalling how he and Elena had walked the mansion's gardens under moonlight. Her absence pressed on him in a way he hadn't anticipated. Business, however, did not pause for personal brooding. A critical negotiation loomed with the board regarding the Wilcott building. Investors clamored for the quickest path to profit. Preservationists amped up public pressure. Adam knew reintroducing the alternative design, preserving the building's facade, would provoke resistance from certain stakeholders, yet the idea refused to leave his mind. To gain clarity, he dialed Robert Chen's number. The 45-year-old attorney answered with his usual professional calm. "If you push for these preservation changes, it'll cost more time and money," Robert warned. "You might lose some investors." Adam pinched the bridge of his nose, exhaustion heavy in his voice. "I'm aware, but there's a bigger picture. We can't bulldoze every historic landmark and then pat ourselves on the back for turning a profit. That's not a typical Adam Donovan stance," Robert noted dryly. Adam hesitated, recalling Elena's impassioned arguments. "People change," he murmured. "I'll need the revised projections. Email them by tomorrow." After hanging up, Adam scrolled through his phone, scanning texts about an upcoming charity gala for a local youth arts organization. An annual high society event he typically sponsored. He found himself toying with the idea of inviting Elena. The notion made his pulse quicken, but doubt soon followed. Would she even accept after their tumultuous parting? Over at Le Jardin, Elena closed the restaurant one night, exhaustion setting in as she locked the doors. Marco Gallo, the head chef, lingered beside her, curiosity in his warm brown eyes. "You seem preoccupied," he observed gently. "Chicago storms getting under your skin." She mustered a smile. "In a way, I'm just sorting some personal matters." "Nothing to worry about." As she stepped into the cool night air, Elena admitted she missed the quiet reassurance of Adam's company more than she'd ever thought possible. She replayed the memory of him, gentle yet pensive, telling her he wanted to revisit the Wilcott plan. Had he followed through? Did he still think about her? Unseen to each other, both she and Adam passed their days wrestling with a sensation of emptiness. The storm had tossed them together, and now a new kind of stillness enveloped them, a hush in which every echo of the other's voice seemed magnified. Even as life resumed its daily grind, the question lingered in both their hearts. What happens next, when absence speaks louder than words? The annual Youth Arts Charity Gala arrived on a crisp Friday evening. Held in the grand ballroom of Donovan, Chicago, one of Adam's flagship hotels, it was an event known for its glittering crowd of philanthropists, entrepreneurs, and city officials. Elena hesitated before accepting the invitation that unexpectedly appeared in her inbox, an elegant Evite signed by Adam Donovan requesting her presence as his personal guest. She stared at the screen for a full minute before making up her mind. That evening, Elena arrived in a sleek navy blue dress that draped gracefully over her frame. A mild flutter of nerves accompanied her as she crossed the shimmering lobby, passing couples in formal wear. Soft orchestral music filtered through the gilded doors of the ballroom, where crystal chandeliers cast warm light on the polished floors. She spotted a cluster of local celebrities mingling near a grand floral arrangement, but her focus remained on finding Adam. Her heart jolted when she saw him at the far end of the ballroom, conversing with two board members. He wore a tailored charcoal suit, dark hair neatly styled, exuding his typical poised confidence. Yet his stance shifted the moment he noticed her, as if the air crackled between them. Politely excusing himself from the conversation, Adam wove through the crowd to greet her. "Elena," he said, voice low but charged with emotion. "Thank you for coming." She offered a tentative smile. "The invitation was a surprise, but I'm glad I came." A flush of warmth spread in her chest at the sight of him, a reminder of the tension and unspoken feelings left hanging after she'd departed his mansion. Before they could speak further, Adam was pulled into a round of introductions. City council members, charity organizers, society writers. Elena hovered by his side, answering polite questions about Le Jardin. Though she felt a tinge of discomfort in the spotlight, She managed gracious small talk. Occasionally, she met Adam's gaze in a silent exchange that promised deeper conversation once obligations were fulfilled. "Adam Donovan, you've outdone yourself again," came a smooth voice as Richard Keller, a mentor-turned-rival of Adam's, approached. With silvering hair and a polished grin, Richard glanced at Elena. "I see you're bringing new company these days." "Delighted to meet you. Elena, is it?" Elena nodded, something about his calculating smile setting her on edge. Adam tensed subtly. "Elena Reeves, manager at Le Jardin," Adam clarified. "She's also been providing me with some community insights on a project." Richard's brows lifted, but he kept his tone pleasant. "Ah, yes. The Wilcott building drama, I presume." He flashed a quick grin at Elena. "I do hope your advice isn't steering Adam away from profitable opportunities. He's quite the master at those." Though the remark was framed politely, Elena sensed the barb. She stood a little taller. "Sometimes the most profitable outcome isn't always the best for the community, Mr. Keller. Adam and I have discussed more balanced approaches." Richard let out a low chuckle, turning to Adam. "Well, well. A new perspective indeed." He offered a handshake so firm it verged on a challenge. "Good luck with that, Adam. I look forward to seeing how the board takes it." With that, he drifted into the crowd, leaving an undercurrent of tension in his wake. Elena noticed Adam's rigid posture. "He's not exactly subtle," she murmured. Adam exhaled slowly. "He's a master at pushing buttons, but I won't let him derail what I'm trying to do. We can talk more privately. Shall we get some fresh air on the balcony?" Outside, the city lights sparkled, and a gentle breeze rustled Elena's hair. Adam leaned on the balcony railing, shoulders visibly relaxing. "This place can be suffocating," he admitted. "So many expectations." Elena joined him, resting her hand lightly on the ornate rail. "Tell me about it," she said with a quiet laugh. "I've never been fond of big galas. But seeing you here—" She paused, meeting his gaze. "I'm curious. How have things been since I left?" He gave a half-smile. "Busy, complicated. My board is pushing for the old plan on Wilcott, but I'm still fighting for the preservation approach. And personally, I've missed talking to you." She felt her breath catch. "I've missed you too." The soft notes of the orchestra drifted through the open doors, blending with the hum of traffic below. In that moment, amid the swirl of social demands, they found a fleeting bubble of intimacy, neither quite sure what came next, but reassured by each other's presence. Whatever challenges lay ahead, at least they were facing them side by side, if only for tonight. Following the gala, Adam arranged a more private meeting with Elena to outline his new design plans for the Wilcott building. They agreed to meet at a quiet cafe near Millennium Park, a spot far removed from the glitzy Donovan offices or the bustle of Le Jardin. Late afternoon sunlight poured through the windows as they slid into a small booth, each with a coffee in hand. Elena studied the sketches Adam spread out on the table, noting how the proposed layout preserved the building's historic façade, repurposed interior spaces for modern amenities, and even included a small cultural exhibit dedicated to the site's history. "This is so much more thoughtful," she said, impressed. Adam nodded. "Robert Chen's still reworking the legal and financial aspects. We'll need a bigger budget, but I'm trying to convince the board it'll pay off in goodwill and unique branding." Her expression brightened. "I believe it will, if you present it right." She tapped the sketches. "I can help put you in touch with local historians or community leaders. They'll rally behind a plan like this." His tense shoulders seemed to relax. "That might give me more leverage with the board," he smiled, leaning back. "Thank you." They spoke easily for half an hour, the conversation drifting between business logistics and personal anecdotes. Elena confided her own dream of launching a cooking initiative for at-risk youth. perhaps in conjunction with the Wilcott's cultural space. Adam listened intently, the spark in his blue eyes revealing genuine enthusiasm. It felt like the stormy days at his mansion had forged an unspoken understanding, one that only grew stronger now. But as they were gathering their things to leave, Adam's phone buzzed. He frowned at a text from Jessica. Richard Keller was just in the office, offering alternative investor leads. Seems suspicious. Another message popped up from Vanessa, warning him about a rumor swirling within the board, something about leaked financial projections that contradicted Adam's new vision. An uneasy feeling coiled in his chest. He glanced at Elena. "Looks like Richard is making moves behind my back. I need to get to the bottom of this." They stepped out onto the street. Early evening bustle surrounded them, commuters hurrying by. As they spoke, the setting sun cast long shadows across the sidewalk. "Do you think he'd go so far as to sabotage your plan?" Elena asked, concern etching her features. Adam's jaw tightened. "He's done it before, in smaller ways. He was my mentor years ago. Then we parted on bad terms when he tried to undermine one of my expansions. Now, with Wilcott in the spotlight, he might see an opportunity." Just then, Elena's phone chimed with a call from Madalena Costa, the property owner of Le Jardin. Elena stepped aside to answer. After a brief, tense conversation, she returned, looking unsettled. "Madalena's been approached by someone who wants to buy the restaurant property outright. She suspects it's linked to your hotel negotiations. If that's Richard, he might be pressuring her to push me out or use me to manipulate you." Adam rubbed his temples. "He's trying to corner me by threatening your job. That's low, even for him." She sighed. "Madalena won't sell unless it's a great deal, but it's still worrying. My position could be in jeopardy if he keeps sweetening the offer." Their eyes locked, a wave of concern passing between them. Adam reached for her hand, ignoring the curious glances of passers-by. "I can't let you be collateral damage," he said, voice firm. "I'll handle Richard, whatever he's planning. I'll confront it head-on. I won't let him force me to abandon the new plan or hurt you in the process." Elena squeezed his hand in silent support. "I can't stop you from taking a stand. But be careful. He might have the board's ear if he promises higher returns." Adam exhaled, releasing her hand reluctantly as they stood at a busy crosswalk. "I know. I'm prepared to lose some allies if it means doing the right thing. And if the board calls for a vote, so be it. I won't back down." The traffic light changed, and people surged around them. For a moment, they remained still in that sea of motion, the tension of impending conflict weighing heavily. But beneath the anxiety, there was a current of resolve, a feeling that if they stood together, they might weather whatever conspiracies Richard set in motion. Because sometimes the hardest choices define not only business outcomes, but the very core of who they wish to become. The boardroom at Donovan Luxury Hotels felt unusually oppressive as Adam prepared for the most critical meeting of his career. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased Chicago's skyline, but storm clouds threatened overhead, mirroring the tension within. Around the massive conference table sat stern-faced board members, their attention fixed on quarterly reports and projections for the Wilcott building. Richard Keller, impeccably dressed in a dark suit, lounged at the far end of the table. He had no official seat on the board, but had been invited to present alternative funding opportunities. Adam suspected those opportunities hinged on gutting the historic property. Sitting beside Richard was Gerald Harper, the 65-year-old board president, whose white hair and severe expression reflected decades of corporate battles. Adam took a breath, conscious that Elena's presence wasn't here to calm him. She'd offered to stand by him, but he insisted this fight was his to lead. Robert Chen was on his right, flipping through printouts of Adam's revised plan, At the appointed time, Gerald signaled the start of the meeting. As you all know, we have two divergent proposals regarding the Wilcott building, Gerald began, voice measured. First, Mr. Donovan's new concept preserving the facade, adding community spaces, and promoting historical value. Second, a more straightforward demolition and rebuild, which promises larger immediate returns. Adam rose. Ladies and gentlemen, I won't pretend my plan is the cheapest. It demands a higher initial outlay and potentially longer timelines. But it also offers intangible benefits, a unique brand story, goodwill from the community, and new partnerships with local organizations. Richard cleared his throat, sliding a document forward. Let's talk numbers, he said with an oily smoothness. My associates are prepared to invest in Donovan hotels, but only if we focus on maximizing returns. Preservation efforts are noble, but they don't align with the high-revenue model. A few board members exchanged glances. Adam sensed their hesitation. Profit was their lifeblood. He took a step closer to the table, exuding calm resolve. Chasing immediate profit at the expense of heritage may bring short-term gains, but it limits our long-term vision. Donovan Hotels can be known for innovation and respect for local culture. Destroying the Wilcott building removes a piece of Chicago's soul. Richard gave a patronizing shrug. We can incorporate tributes to the building's history in the new design. Plaques, pictures, sentimental touches. We need the freedom to develop this site efficiently. Voices murmured around the table, the tension thick enough to cut. Finally, Gerald rapped his knuckles for silence. We'll put it to a vote, but be warned, Adam. If the majority chooses demolition, the board expects you to comply. We can't risk investors pulling out. Your role as CEO depends on the success of this expansion. Adam's stomach knotted. He felt the ultimatum as sharply as if someone pressed a knife to his throat. Do it the old way, or risk losing his empire. Momentarily, he recalled the days when he had nothing. But then he thought of Elena's conviction, the people who cared about preserving Chicago's identity, and the music he had begun playing again in his deserted room. He refused to bury that part of himself under profit margins. Straightening, he spoke with renewed clarity. If preserving something meaningful means losing certain investors, so be it. I'd rather rebuild than betray the principles I'm coming to value. Donovan Hotels is more than a quick cash grab. It's my life's work, and I won't let it become a soulless enterprise. A hushed awe settled on the room. The board members shifted uncomfortably, unaccustomed to seeing Adam place ideals above strategic gains. Richard's smirk faded into a grim line, and Gerald looked visibly taken aback. All right, Gerald said, voice taut. We vote. Paper ballots were passed around and each member scribbled on them, face set with deliberation. Moments later, the ballots were collected, counted, and recounted. Tension soared as everyone waited for the final announcement. Gerald cleared his throat, reading the result. By a narrow margin, the board supports Adam Donovan's alternative preservation plan. A stunned silence held the room. Richard stood abruptly, tossing his pen on the table. This is madness, he hissed. You're sacrificing half your profits on sentiment. I won't back it. Adam simply met his glare. Then feel free to leave. Donovan Hotels will stand by its choice, and I'm prepared to invest personal funds if needed. Richard stormed out, leaving an uneasy hush. Adam exhaled, heart pounding. He'd gambled everything on this. The board had backed him, but the cost might be high. Yet in that moment, he felt a surge of exhilaration. He had chosen integrity over convenience, a decision that might reshape not just the Wilcott project, but the entire culture of his company. In the weeks following that decisive board vote, Adam's vision for the Wilcott building began taking shape. Construction crews carefully prepared the site, preserving the grand old facade while updating the interior framework. Public opinion shifted positively. News outlets praised Donovan Hotels for choosing historic sensitivity. Though some investors grumbled, new partners stepped in, drawn to the fresh, community-centered approach. At the same time, Elena's life found a new rhythm. Le Jardin saw a boost in clientele, thanks partly to buzz around Adam's preservation story and Elena's involvement. Tucked in her office one afternoon, she exchanged texts with Sophie, who had finally wrangled Elena's full confession about the storm, Adam's mansion, and the complicated romance blossoming in between. Sophie's replies ranged from playful teasing to genuine excitement about Elena's future in Chicago. But it wasn't just business or family that consumed Elena's thoughts. Each evening she and Adam spoke, sometimes by phone, sometimes over quick coffee dates. They discussed Wilcott's progress, fresh opportunities, and eventually more personal topics. Bit by bit, Adam unveiled details about a younger brother he'd lost touch with, and Elena opened up about how her sister became her anchor after their parents' accident. Eventually, Adam invited Elena to tour the Wilcott site. One bright afternoon, they donned hard hats and reflective vests, stepping carefully around scaffolding and dusty corridors. Despite the noise of drills and the acrid smell of fresh paint, Elena felt exhilarated watching the building's transformation. Adam pointed out where a small community hall would stand, complete with an exhibit showcasing local history. They ended the tour in a back section slated to become a philanthropic culinary space, an idea that merged Elena's dream of teaching aspiring young chefs with Adam's philanthropic vision. She ran her hand along the old brick, a sparkle in her eye. "I can already imagine the classes here," she said, turning to him. "Kids from underprivileged neighborhoods, learning culinary fundamentals, discovering their passions. It's so real." Adam's gaze was warm. "It's the kind of project I used to dismiss. Too soft, not enough profit. Now I see it as an investment in something that matters." "You showed me that." A slight breeze stirred dust motes in a shaft of sunlight. They stood in that hazy glow, the hum of workmen echoing in the background. Elena rested a hand on Adam's arm. "It's not just me. You had this in you all along, but maybe you needed a jolt from that storm to bring it out." He traced the edge of her hard hat with a wry grin. "A jolt, and a determined restaurant manager with a strong sense of justice." His expression softened. "And a strong sense of compassion." They stepped outside, blinking in the brightness. On the sidewalk, they shed their safety gear. Adam glanced at her with a hint of hesitation. "If you're free tonight, I'd like to show you something else. Another part of my life that might need rebuilding." Curiosity sparked in her eyes. "Of course." That evening, Elena drove to a modest, tree-lined suburb where Adam had arranged a meeting with David Donovan, his younger brother. They hadn't spoken in years, but with renewed resolve, Adam had reached out, seeking reconciliation. Elena, recognizing the gravity, stood quietly beside Adam in a small diner as David entered, warily at first, then thawing with each passing moment. Words once left unsaid spilled out, apologies, regrets, and cautious hopes. By the end of the meal, Elena saw relief etched on Adam's face. This was no longer just about a building or a business empire. It was about constructing bridges where walls had been. Later, as they walked David to his car, Adam placed an arm around Elena's shoulders in a gesture of genuine gratitude. On the drive back, dusk spread across the sky, the city lights flickering awake. A contented hush filled the car, deeper than the hum of tires on pavement. Neither needed to speak. The knowledge that they were traveling side by side through more than just traffic brought its own sense of peace. They reached Elena's apartment, and before she stepped out, Adam gently caught her hand. "Thank you," he murmured, voice thick with emotion, "for everything." She squeezed his hand in return. "We're just getting started," she whispered. And as she closed the door behind her, Elena realized that neither she nor Adam was alone anymore. They had begun to reconstruct more than an old Chicago landmark. They were also rebuilding themselves, forging a shared future one careful brick at a time. A late spring chill swept through Chicago, ushering in fresh blossoms alongside unpredictable weather. Though months had passed since the Wilcott vote, Elena and Adam still moved through uncharted emotional territory. Some days, their rhythm seemed effortless, business meetings evolving into spontaneous dinners, philanthropic plans turning into shared projects. Other days, old doubts tugged at them, testing the strength of their evolving bond. One evening, after closing Le Jardin, Elena arrived at Adam's mansion for a quiet meal. She carried a folder of paperwork detailing her proposed culinary program for local teens, an initiative that would soon launch within the newly renovated Wilcott building. Stepping into the foyer, she sensed an undercurrent of tension. Adam greeted her with a brief hug, but his eyes held a shadow of worry. "Everything okay?" she asked, setting her folder on a gleaming side table. He hesitated, raking a hand through his dark hair. "My brother David called. We've been making good progress repairing our relationship, but old grievances popped up, family tensions, money matters." He gave a frustrated sigh. "It reminded me how quickly the past can rear up." She guided him to the living room, urging him to sit. "Sometimes the bigger the healing, the more triggers appear," she said, recalling her own turbulent emotions after losing her parents. "You've both come so far." A flicker of gratitude crossed his face. "I guess I'm afraid of falling back into old patterns, shutting people out, letting pride take over." He paused, a small grimace forming. "I've been thinking of talking to a professional. Actually, I have an appointment set up with Dr. Lillian Chen. She's a therapist recommended by Robert Chen, no relation, but apparently top in her field." Elena's eyes warmed with approval. "That's a big step, Adam. It shows you're committed to real change." He reached for her hand, voice dipping with vulnerability. "Would you consider coming to a session with me at some point? I know I have to handle my own issues, but I'd also like to work on us." She squeezed his hand gently. "I'll be there whenever you're ready." Over the next week, they each faced personal hurdles. Elena wrestled with her own insecurities, fears that she might lose herself in this relationship, just as she had once buried her identity under professional ambition in New York. Late one night, she called Sophie, confessing her anxieties. "I'm not used to depending on anyone," Elena admitted. "What if this all unravels?" Sophie's reply was swift. "You're stronger than you think. Let yourself be vulnerable. True connection thrives on that." A few days later, Elena joined Adam at Dr. Lillian Chen's office for a short, combined consultation. The room was soothing, lined with soft lighting and upholstered chairs in muted tones. Dr. Chen, a poised woman in her 50s, listened intently as they each described their backgrounds. Adam's relentless drive to escape poverty, Elena's post-tragedy resolve to stand on her own. "Doctor." Chen posed gentle but probing questions, her gaze compassionate. "What do you fear most if you let go of total control?" she asked Adam. He hesitated, glancing at Elena. "I'm afraid of being inadequate, of not living up to what I've built, or losing people who matter if they see my weaknesses." Turning to Elena, Dr. Chen asked, "And you? What keeps you guarded?" Elena exhaled slowly. "I'm afraid of losing my autonomy, of becoming so entwined in someone else's life that I forget who I am." The session ended with a renewed sense of determination on both sides. Walking out into the crisp twilight, Adam and Elena exchanged a look that spoke of relief and lingering trepidation. It felt like the beginning of a deeper commitment to growth, to understanding, to each other. That evening, they returned to the mansion, cooking together in the once rarely used kitchen. As they prepared a simple pasta dish, their movements synchronized, chopping, stirring, tasting, small acts that felt oddly intimate. Over the dinner table, they shared smiles that acknowledged both the darkness of past fears and the promise of new beginnings. By the time they said goodnight, the hush of vulnerability had transformed into an undercurrent of mutual resolve. They still carried scars, but they chose to believe their bond was strong enough to hold them together, even when confronted by the old demons of doubt. In the days ahead, they would move forward hand in hand, determined to forge a future that honored their individual identities, yet embraced the beautiful chaos of growing together. Almost a year passed to the day since the storm that had first brought Elena to Adam's estate. Late summer drifted into early fall, and the newly reopened Wilcott Hotel stood as a tribute to balanced progress, its historical façade meticulously preserved, its interior boasting modern elegance. The adjacent culinary space, which Elena had helped design, bustled with energy. Young, aspiring chefs from diverse neighborhoods filled the gleaming counters with laughter, questions, and earnest ambitions. One afternoon, news anchors predicted another powerful storm heading toward Chicago, a swirl of dark clouds that reminded everyone of last year's dramatic downpour. Far from dreading it, Elena felt a ripple of awe. She recalled how that first storm had changed everything, leading her to the edge of Adam's property and into his guarded life. They decided to commemorate the anniversary by hosting a small gathering at the Wilcott, inviting staff, community members, and a handful of close friends. Adam and Elena worked side by side, ensuring the event showcased the new philanthropic culinary program, letting the young participants serve hors d'oeuvres they had learned to create. The space radiated excitement, the hum of conversation mixing with the clink of glassware. Midway through the gathering, Adam stepped up to a small podium. The crowd hushed expectantly. Elena stood off to one side, curious as to what he might say. His eyes briefly caught hers. Then he cleared his throat. "A year ago," he began, "I was on a path that, in many ways, felt unstoppable but hollow. It took a storm, literal and metaphorical, to force me to slow down and see what I was missing. This building you stand in now, it could have been another cookie-cutter investment. Instead, it's something more." He gestured toward a glass atrium where historical photographs of the Wilcott neighborhood were displayed, along with the new teaching kitchen. "We chose to preserve this heritage, and we chose to open a space where young people can learn and dream. I've discovered that success measured only by profit means very little if we strip away what truly matters. Our roots, our communities, our ability to connect with one another." A round of applause swelled. Elena felt her heart soar at the sincerity in his voice. After so many months, the transformation in Adam's demeanor was undeniable. He spoke less like a remote tycoon and more like a visionary with genuine empathy. Outside, rain began to pelt the glass ceiling of the atrium. Through the translucent panels, flashes of lightning illuminated the late afternoon sky. Instead of dampening spirits, the storm seemed to amplify the sense of unity inside. As the event wound down, Elena and Adam excused themselves from well-wishers. They slipped out to a rear balcony, newly renovated to offer a panoramic view of the city lights and the swirling sky. Rain splashed across the stone tiles, but they stood beneath a small awning, watching thunderclouds approach. "It's strange," Elena mused, hugging her elbows, "how this storm feels less threatening than last year's. Maybe because we're in a different place now." Adam nodded, slipping an arm around her waist. Exactly. Last time I was alone in that big mansion, convinced my world revolved around controlling every detail. You showed up, unconscious, with a folder that changed the direction of my entire business and my life. She grinned. You make it sound more dramatic than it was. He shook his head. You have no idea how dramatic it felt to me. His voice softened, and he touched her cheek gently. Thank you for crashing into my life. A curtain of rain swept across the balcony's edge, wind blowing droplets against their faces. Lightning crackled overhead, followed by a rumbling burst of thunder. For a moment, they simply watched the storm together, two people who had faced their own inner tempests and found each other in the process. Elena pressed closer, the warmth of his jacket a comforting barrier against the chill. While the storm raged outside, she realized how far they had both come. This new tempest, instead of symbolizing chaos, felt like a reminder of their resilience, a full circle from the night they first collided, each changed forever by that fateful encounter in the rain. Over the following months, the Wilcott project became a beacon of civic pride. Local press lauded Adam for integrating community and corporate interests, and Elena's culinary program garnered accolades for giving underserved youth a platform to learn real-world skills. One bright fall weekend, they held a graduation ceremony for the inaugural cohort of young chefs who had completed the intensive training. Families crowded the Wilcott's event hall, sampling the students' dishes with shining eyes of pride. Adam and Elena stood off to the side, observing the celebration unfold. Cameras flashed as the newly minted teenage chefs beamed in their white uniforms. One young man, Miguel Ramirez, approached them. He was 17, with a shy smile and a spark in his eyes that hinted at hidden potential. He clasped Elena's hand. Thank you for believing in me. I used to think no one cared about kids like us. Touched, Elena patted his shoulder. Promise you won't stop here. You have a real gift. Adam extended his own hand. Keep this up, Miguel. One day I hope to book a table at your restaurant. Miguel's grin widened, and he returned to his fellow graduates. Elena and Adam exchanged a glance, hearts brimming with fulfillment. Together, they had built more than a successful business venture. They had planted seeds of hope in a new generation. Later that afternoon, they retreated to the Wilcott's rooftop garden, a small oasis featuring potted herbs and flowers accessible to the culinary program. The crisp breeze carried hints of roasted garlic from the kitchens below. In the distance, Chicago's skyline gleamed under the autumn sun. Elena leaned on the railing. Seeing those kids so proud of themselves, that's the kind of legacy I want to leave. My parents always taught me that food is more than nourishment. It's a way to bring people together. Adam folded his arms, gazing out at the city. I used to chase a legacy measured only by skyscrapers, financial holdings, and expansions. Now, I realize true legacy is about impact. Those kids might go on to open restaurants, volunteer in communities, or even mentor others. That ripple effect means more to me than a perfect profit margin. She reached for his hand. It's amazing how much has changed in a year. Remember when you told me about your father, how you believed you had to be ruthless to succeed? You're proving otherwise. His mouth curved into a thoughtful smile. I hope so. But I also learned I can't do it alone. Having people around me, having you by my side, makes all the difference. They strolled along the garden pathway, discussing future expansions for the program. Perhaps a satellite kitchen in another neighborhood, or even a traveling mentorship for rural communities. Each idea excited them, fueled by the realization that the Donovan empire could serve a purpose broader than just luxury accommodations. As twilight approached, they descended to the Wilcott's lobby. A sleek black car waited outside, ready to whisk them to a celebratory dinner. Elena paused by a framed photo of the original Wilcott façade, a reminder of how far the project had come. "I wish my parents could see this," she said softly. "They'd be so proud." Adam gave her hand a comforting squeeze. "You carry them with you, Elena. Their values shaped everything you do." They stepped outside into the golden light of the setting sun. The city bustled around them, but in that moment, the world seemed gentle and full of possibility. Before climbing into the car, Adam caught Elena's gaze. "I've been thinking," he began, "about the bigger picture, beyond hotels, beyond this building. This city has so much untapped potential, and I want our legacy to be more than a single triumph." She brushed a wind-blown strand of hair behind her ear. "Are you suggesting more philanthropic ventures? Because I'm all in, but I also have a restaurant to run." He laughed softly. "We'll figure out the balance. Maybe we can launch a foundation dedicated to educational programs, job training, arts, everything we once dismissed as side projects. I've already talked to David about handling some of the administration." Their voices merged in an animated discussion as they slid into the car, charting a course for the next phase of their combined dream. Across the city streets, lights flickered on, marking the dawn of Chicago's nightlife. But for Adam and Elena, it felt like a different kind of illumination. The clarity of knowing they were forging a legacy, intertwined with the hopes of countless people who might one day say, "This changed my life for the better." Early morning light filtered through the French doors of Adam's mansion, casting gentle beams across the kitchen where he and Elena stood side by side, preparing a simple breakfast. Steam rose from a pot of coffee, and the scent of fresh bread lingered. The world outside was bathed in a peach-hued dawn, as if nature itself signaled the start of a new era. Their schedules were packed, as usual, meetings with sponsors for the culinary program, a potential expansion for Donovan Hotels in another state, and an afternoon appointment with David to finalize the formation of the Donovan Foundation. Despite the steady hum of responsibilities, an undercurrent of peaceful contentment flowed between them this morning. Elena poured coffee into 2 mugs. "So, the company just won an award for responsible development," she said, referencing the news that had broken late last night. "Donovan Hotels is officially recognized for its community-centered approach." Adam leaned against the counter, the corners of his mouth lifting. "It feels surreal. For years, I believed recognition came only from outperforming rivals and maximizing revenue. Now the acknowledgement means something deeper because it aligns with the direction we've chosen." They settled at the small breakfast nook by the window, an intimate corner that overlooked the estate's gardens. The once empty expanse now featured a mix of neatly pruned shrubs and wilder patches of flowers. Elena's influence, preferring a touch of natural growth over rigid lines. While they ate, they chatted about upcoming events, from a second wave of culinary students to a benefit dinner in a few weeks' time. At one point, Elena went quiet. Adam noticed her pensive expression and reached for her hand. "What's on your mind?" She inhaled, clearly nervous. "There's something I need to tell you." Gently resting a palm over her abdomen, she dropped her gaze. "I found out yesterday. I'm pregnant." Adam froze, mug halfway to his lips. His pulse thundered in his ears, an unspoken swirl of emotion flaring inside. For a moment, he sat there, stunned, wrestling with the enormity of the news. Slowly, he set the coffee down and stood. Elena's eyes brimmed with uncertainty. Would this scare him? Would he see it as another loss of control? 1,000 thoughts rattled through his mind. His father's struggles, the old fear of not being enough, the desire to protect what he cherished. But overriding it all was a wave of tenderness. He slid a hand around her waist, guiding her to stand. "Elena," he managed softly, pressing his forehead to hers. "Are you happy?" "Because I am. I'm surprised, maybe a little scared, but happy beyond words." Her eyes glistened. "I'm still processing it, but yes, I'm happy, even if it's overwhelming. We've come so far. This is the last thing I expected, but I think—" She hesitated, then a gentle smile curved her lips. "I think it's a wonderful new chapter for us." He cradled her face in his hands, heart surging with a depth of affection he never imagined himself capable of. In the golden morning light, they stood in silent affirmation, the weight of their shared future pulsing between them. The once aloof magnate and the fiercely independent chef now found themselves on the brink of becoming a family. When they finally pulled apart, Elena exhaled a trembling laugh. "I guess we'll have to add a nursery to the Donovan Foundation's list of projects." Adam chuckled, eyes still misty. "We can handle expansions and philanthropic initiatives, but I have a feeling raising a child might be the greatest undertaking yet." Together, they finished their breakfast, adrenaline thrumming beneath every bite. Outside, the sun rose higher, illuminating the estate's evolving landscape. Once a fortress of solitude, now a place of warmth and possibility. As they carried their plates to the sink, Adam paused by the window and gazed toward the horizon. He thought about his empire, the hotels, the foundation, the transformations underway, and realized that for all his successes, nothing compared to this sense of devotion he felt when Elena looked at him with hope. The morning's revelation was a final affirmation that the greatest luxury in life wasn't found in penthouse suites or lavish bank accounts. It was found in the courage to open his heart, fully, unreservedly to love, to community, to the unknown that lay ahead. And with Elena by his side, he felt certain that whatever the future brought, they would face it together. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.